of people who overpayments were made to them during the pandemic. And in some cases, these are large amounts of money that they're now being asked to repay. You know, we're aware that, in fact, there are procedures for waivers to be given in the case of overpayment, but unfortunately, too many people are not aware of this. It is not clear when you get a bill from the Department of Labor that there are mechanisms in place for you to get a waiver. You know, so many people suffered, and particularly at the very beginning when abruptly businesses closed down, schools closed down, daycare centers closed down, and working families were left without any options about paying their bills. They didn't have a job to go to, or in cases where they did have a job, they didn't have anyone to take care of their kids because the schools were closed, the daycare centers were closed. It was a tragic situation, and no one was at fault. This pandemic created havoc, and so many people, so many working families suffered in ways that are unimaginable. Beyond not having money to pay their bills, unfortunately, so many of them saw relatives and family members die from COVID. So what concerns me is that we're at a moment here where overpayment of unemployment, it's just overwhelming for people, particularly people who haven't even gone back to work. So we're calling on the state, we're calling on DOL, the administration, the legislature. We need a call to action. We need to do something quickly to reassure people that we're going to be there for them to get them through this crisis, this yet another crisis. So I think that what we want to make sure that individuals know, you know, if you've gotten an overpayment bill, there are options. Besides appeal, you can file for a waiver. We are appreciative that the federal government in the stimulus bill that was passed in January made it clear that we need to be just and equitable and resolving overpayment claims, and that there are potential for waivers and for forgiveness. So this is a time when we need to make sure that everyone knows that the state has been stepping up since the beginning of this pandemic. We've helped people in so many ways, and this is another moment where we have to step up. You know, I think for all of us who read the newspapers, and I'm one that still reads the daily newspaper before I have my coffee even, and what was really disturbing was to hear of a woman who lost her job, couldn't work at McDonald's because she had no one to take care of her child. And she had to stay home and school her child during the pandemic. She was paid unemployment. According to the newspaper, McDonald's contested it because they didn't technically lay her off. Here's a great case where we as a state need to step up. We need to say to this person, we understand you're a low-wage worker. You don't have it within your resources. You don't have inherited wealth. You're not in a position to pay back large sums of money, even 4 months of unemployment to the state. This is where we need to step up. We cannot ask people to do this. So we wanted to be here today to get it out to the people of Connecticut. Contact your legislators. Many people have. We're already dealing with overpayment cases, and we are working with DOL to resolve those. But if you haven't done that yet, make sure you file for waivers. Make sure you get in touch with your legislators. Make sure you're getting assistance. There's Connecticut Legal Services that's dealing with a lot of these cases. There are places to go for help, and we as a state we need to make sure that folks are aware of that, and we need to make sure that organizationally we're making that clear to people, that we're not leaving them in the dark to live with that anxiety of how am I going to pay that overpayment back. You know, I want to be totally clear. There are cases of fraud. Clearly, you know, the DOL has already uncovered something like 100,000 cases of fraud. We have no mercy for those folks. They should pay every penny back, and we should enforce the penalties to the fullest extent. During a pandemic, for someone to make money fraudulently is It's unspeakable. So we want to be clear. We're not talking about fraudulent cases. We're talking about poor, hardworking people who are just trying to get by during a crisis. And those are the folks that we need to stand with. So I'd like to turn over the podium to my co-chair and dear friend and an ally in this fight for working families, our co-chair, Representative Robin Porter.
Thank you, Senator Kushner. And as she said, I am Representative Porter, representing the 94th District, Hampden and New Haven, and the House Chair for Labor and Public Employees. And I'm really here today to say that I want not only our constituents, but also all of House Dems, all of Senate Dems, to know that I have been in conversations with my leadership and also in conversations with our liaison for the Department of Labor. And this is an awful issue. I'm appalled that we even have to be standing here talking about repayment of overpayments during a time when it was a result of a pandemic that still persists. But here we are. And I just want people to know that we are working on the issue, that there are a lot of details that we don't have, knowledge of. And I don't want to be hasteful, right? Haste makes waste. I want to make sure that we're collecting the facts. We know the details, because we do know the devil is in the details. And we need to make sure we know what we're talking about as we make demands, that they're actually demands that can be met legally. So that has been my biggest concern in this issue, but I did want to come out and stand today with my co-chair to say that we are fully aware of what's going on. We're not fully aware of what the resources are, but I have been told by Speaker Ritter that he does believe we have the resources to address this, and this is what I will say, to my leadership in the Senate and the House and the governor's office. We have the resources, guys. Let's figure out how to make this happen and how to make these people whole. This should be the last thing that they have to worry about. And as it's been said, we have people, constituents, all of us, that are facing this issue that actually aren't back to work. And my grandmother had an old saying. She said, you can't get blood from a turnip. So I'm not here to say that, that the payments don't need to be made, because I also understand the other side of this is the employers, right? The trust fund itself and how this will impact it. So we need to make sure that whatever the solution is, that all parties, all stakeholders are made whole, and that does include employers. So it's multifaceted and it's very intersectional, and we need to get a full scope of what's going on. And basically, we really are waiting on information back from the feds to figure out exactly what we can do as a state to help relieve claimants of this burden, because I don't believe it is their responsibility. Look, I'm not going to even get into the corporate bailouts, but we know how we've done as a country bailing out corporations during times when they knew they were in the wrong and doing wrong. We're talking about people that didn't commit fraud. There's several reasons why these overpayments are coming up. I want to make sure that we bail them out, because these are the folks that have kept this state and this country nationally open while we all have been home, safe and sound, working remotely. They put their lives and their family lives on the line, and many have died themselves, workers, and their family members. So this should be the very least of their worries. So I stand in concert with that. And at this time, I will turn the mic over to Senator Cabrera, who is the Vice Chair in the Senate for the Labor and Public Employees Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Good morning. My name is George Cabrera, represent the 17th Senatorial District, and I'm the Vice Chair of Labor. First, thank my coach, Senator Kushner, and Representative Porter for your leadership on this issue. And Rep. Hughes, good to see you as always. I started to receive several emails and phone calls a few days ago from constituents who were receiving letters asking them to pay, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars for money they've already spent to make it through this pandemic. And I think it's really important for us to remember where we were. This was a once-in-a-century pandemic that none of us could have predicted. We were all shocked. Many people lost their jobs overnight. The federal and state government were scrambling to try to put programs together very quickly. the environment that folks were trying to navigate to apply for these funds was chaotic. It was stressful. And now, in many cases, some people, upwards of a year after receiving these funds, are being asked to pay some or all of it back. That's unconscionable to me. We still don't know where we're headed. Luckily, our state is well vaccinated compared to the rest of the country. But there are still a lot of unknowns we're navigating and trying to manage for. We don't know what's going to happen with the variant. We don't know what the fall will bring. We don't know what having our children and our college students back at school will result in. And these folks, many of them still not working or just getting back to work, struggling with childcare costs, trying to figure out where they're going to come up with, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars. That is something that we simply cannot let happen. We're better than that. And I'm here today to stand with Senator Kushner and Representative Porter and our leadership to call on the legislature to do something. Because in order to get these families and these people back to work, to give them some sort of stability, we've got to figure out a way to fix this. There's waivers that they could apply for, as Senator Kushner alluded to, but it's more than that. It's about what we're going to do as the state of Connecticut for our working families, for our middle class families who are just starting to get back on their feet. It's very difficult for many of them, and so I'm here today to stand with them, to call on a General Assembly together with my colleagues to do something. And if we do that, I think that is something that would go a long way in helping us get back on the road to recovery for so many families that are still hurting and still struggling. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take any questions that you have.
So just to be specific, what exactly are you asking the Department of Labor to do anything more than they're currently doing?
Well, I know that they're continue to be overwhelmed with cases. As you all know, there are many, many appeals, and it's taking a long time to process them, even though they've hired additional hearing officers. We recognize that the challenges for the Department of Labor are great. It is, I think, incumbent on the Department of Labor to make sure that every person that received an overpayment bill, so to speak, a repayment, that they understand that there are, in addition to appeal processes, that they can apply for these waivers. That's my understanding, that it's not always clear to people. I read in one of your articles, I think it was the Hearst paper, I read about an attorney who said how hard it is to figure out how to fill out this paperwork, and that it was easy for people to make mistakes, even people like himself who was an attorney. So I think that the department has done a good job at resolving cases when we have brought them to them, but we want to make sure that our constituents, the people of Connecticut, understand that we're going to stand with them. I'm not convinced, you know, I hear what Representative Porter said about the trust fund and the need to make sure that we have, that we're addressing the concerns about the trust fund and its stability. That has been a concern in the past. We addressed it in this last legislative session. We also had a bill this session that we passed for a non-charge, so that employers were not actually charged for the experience rating they were that occurred for the people they laid off during this pandemic. So we're very sensitive to the employers and the strain that this has put on them as well. But as was said, we have the resources as a state to step up and back people up. And that's what we need to do. We need the Department of Labor to be engaged in that. We need the administration and the legislature. And I also can speak for our leadership in the Senate that people are very concerned about this problem. We don't want to see working families, people who are struggling to get back on their feet, have the kind of setback that will affect all of our communities. So this is a critical issue. It's critical that we address it quickly and efficiently with it, and reassure people that we're going to be there for them.
What about, one of the things are you trying to get at is sort of a delineation of sort of the innocent mistakes the through no fault of your own type situations, and then there might be some other people who were pushing the envelope or just stepped over the line. I mean, what like, I got here a little late, so.
I mean, there's a very, there's a fraud unit within DOL that really is, you know, they're trained and they're expert in detecting fraud. And clearly we want to, you know, those folks should be pursued and they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. But I do think there were a lot of people who didn't have anywhere else to turn. And I appreciate the fact that the Department of Labor took steps, and you all remember what happened at the beginning when the Department of Labor couldn't answer the phones, didn't have enough people, didn't have a system, a computer system that could handle the volume. And so we appreciate how difficult it was, and we think it was the right decision to push out the money. People were desperate. They needed to have money to pay for food. You know, even if they were not able to pay for rent, there were still so many expenses, just day-to-day expenses. So I appreciate the steps they took to help secure people's lives. But I think at this moment, what we have to say is that even if a person didn't qualify for traditional unemployment, which was sort of the sort of basic threshold they had to meet, in the case of a McDonald's worker who couldn't go to work because they had no child care, those are the situations where we as a state have to step up and say, okay, that person needed help. The DOL got that person unemployment benefits. Now we have to find a way to make sure that person doesn't repay. Is that from other funds within the state so that the trust fund isn't strained or stressed? That's a possibility.
What about the American Rescue Act money? Because there is a pool of money left of that. Is that one of the sources, or is that the primary source?
I think we should certainly look at it, but I also recognize that there are so many demands still on those funds. For instance, we know that the Labor Committee and a lot of the legislature is in favor of hazard pay for our essential workers. We know that those funds would come from the remaining ARPA funds, but as Representative Porter said, those folks were out on the front lines, risking the lives, their own lives and the lives of their families. We believe they deserve hazard pay. So if it can't be from the ARPA funds, then we have to look for other funds.
And going forward, is this something that your committee, you guys will be addressing in the future? Because, I mean, this may not be the only pandemic, this may not be the only natural disaster in which we find widespread historic levels of unemployment. And, you know, even with a new computer system, I could foresee some potential issues popping up again. So is this something that you guys plan to address legislatively?
I think we're always looking to address any issues that impact workers in the state of Connecticut. And, you know, this is something that we'll build on and expand because, as you stated, we don't know what the future holds, and we can only be as best prepared as we have knowledge. So I think that we build a knowledge base, we understand the intricacies of this system and this process and how the state and the feds work together. And then from there, we can decide, you know, feasibly, right? Looking into the future, what may work and what may not. But definitely, we're always looking to make sure that we're covering bases.
Some other states have actually privatized sections of their Department of Labor. Is that something you all would entertain? Is that something, this is an example of maybe somebody else could have done it better?
You know, honestly, I don't think that's the solution. And I don't think it is a case of somebody could have done it better. I think we have really good people in our Department of Labor. But as you all know, and because I'm sure you follow this over the last, 7 or 8 years, we've had a reduction in force. We know that the Labor Department was severely understaffed to begin with, and then had it was impossible with the skeleton staff that they had to actually respond quickly and get up to speed quickly. And this wasn't just in Connecticut. We know it existed around the country. To my knowledge, there's no one that did it better because they privatized the work. I think we have great state employees, and I think that we need to make sure they have all of the tools and resources necessary to carry out the functions of government. That's what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that we're getting people resources, giving good service, and I have confidence we can do that with the state workforce.
And I'll just add to that, just to piggyback off of this whole, state workers versus privatization. I mean, we know that most of the jobs that we got after 2008 were in that industry, under privatization, minimum wage jobs. People that had degrees, six-figure employees were coming back, having to settle for a minimum wage job and carry the burden of student loans, all kind of things. I think what is best is that we build out these state jobs. These are the best jobs that people can have. Benefits, retirement packages, livable, sustainable wages. A lot of them are labor jobs. I would absolutely lean towards building out our state employee base and making sure that the people that live in this state have a viable income to support them so that we can get them off of these wraparound services and actually start lifting people from the bottom so that we can make sure it's a level playing field for everybody.
An estimate on the overpayments that we're talking about at this point? Or is that one of the things you're waiting to hear from the Labor Department?
We are waiting to hear that from the Labor Department, and we've asked for that information. Some of the reporting suggested that it was $8.7 million, but what was clear is that that's not the total pool as well, and that there's going to be continued audits. And so I think we're still waiting for that information, and it's unclear how many people will be impacted.
And I'll just add that we also did have contact with them, and they have responded. Department of Labor, State Department of Labor, liaison sent us an email stating that they are in contact with the feds, getting information so that they can better decide, what they're telling us and where they are with that. So we're waiting to hear back from them. They're waiting to hear back from the feds.
So there's no percentages of that 8.6 million, how many people may have been in overpayment that might not have, that shouldn't have been, that wasn't fraudulent, that was done in good faith?
Two things: I don't think it's complete yet, and so it would be hard to give a percentage, but also I'm not sure the reporting that we've seen has been 30,000 cases, but it's not clear from what we've seen how many of those account for the 8.7 million.
Did the Labor Department give you any kind of time frame in which to expect a response to your employers' request for a specific?
I know we're meeting next week.
Okay, you're meeting next month.
Did they give any indication of how they may be able to improve the waiver system at all, if at all?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the question that we're all eager to resolve. One report I saw said that people are not automatically made aware of the waiver. I think that's something that could be done quickly and immediately to make sure that every person who's asked for a repayment or people who've already been asked for repayment are aware that they can apply for waivers. And I think we need to be making sure that folks have the assistance they need to fill out any applications for waivers or appeals.
How does someone end up, through no fault of their own, through no malfeasance, being overpaid? What is the process of that happening?
So I know that there are many different ways you have to qualify for unemployment. And the way the federal programs were rolled out, in the instance of putting aside those that were independent contractors or self-employed, but the people that were W-2 employees, they had to qualify for traditional employment, even for $1 in order to qualify for the federal monies. There are many specific ways in which you qualify, including being laid off, being available to work even though you were laid off, and having earned enough money within a base period to qualify. So it's very possible somebody didn't qualify because of one of those conditions were not met. And in those instances, even though a person might not have qualified, like the worker we read about who was a McDonald's worker who couldn't go to work, might not have qualified, but yet received unemployment. And those are the cases where we really need to step up.
Who approves that? If you submit your application,
Who approved the initial applications? So the initial applications were all done through DOL, and as I said, DOL was very concerned about making sure, first of all, they didn't have the computer system set up, they didn't have enough people, and they were making sure that people were getting the funds. And you remember what it was like in March and in April, where people were desperate for those claims to be processed. And so I think DOL did the right thing by making sure that people were taken care of. But they also have the obligation now of going through this audit program.
I would say as legislators, we heard from hundreds of claimants that weren't getting their claims processed. We had to escalate, constituent after constituent unemployment claim because they were hearing nothing back. They didn't know the status of their claims. Some of them were complex, like they had 2 jobs and, they were trying to give all the information, and a lot of them took months and months before they saw a penny from unemployment, and they were desperate. I had constituents, I had laid off attorneys that were collecting cans for deposits. It was desperate, and took months and months. Then they finally got a check all at once. Was that an accurate formula? Now DOL is auditing those and deciding whether that one lump payment and then continuing on was accurate or not. And I can tell you that money has been spent in our economy to survive. So
I just think the bottom line is that there are many, many different ways in which people qualified, many ways in which people struggled and we didn't have the resources set up. This isn't about assessing blame.
Right.
It's really about making sure that at this moment where we stand here in Connecticut is with working families, and that we're going to take care of people.
What needs to be fixed moving forward, you don't want to be back there again.
Absolutely, and I think there's a lot, in every field, there's a lot that's been learned by this pandemic, whether it's, in social services, in nursing homes, in the business world. Look at another example, PPP loans. It's another area where there was a very well-intentioned, great program to assist employers. And in fact, there was fraud there as well. Were mistakes made there as well. So we know that as a nation, and really as a world, we weren't prepared for this level of a pandemic. Have we learned a great deal about it? Absolutely. And I think that we will make changes going forward.
One other question. So part of the problem, to my understanding, is that the first level of appeals for an unemployment claim, either from an employer or an employee, has now reached a point of a historic backlog. There's nearly 12,000 initial appeals that are awaiting a decision. Some of them have been waiting for more than a year. How do you solve that problem? And can that be something that can be solved now instead of,
6 months from now?
For the future?
I think that is, we're all aware that there are additional hearing officers that were brought on, but we still have an enormous backlog. And I think that is an area where we need to look about how do we expedite that and try and solve that moving forward, because it is unfair to employers, it's unfair to the individuals who receive payments or didn't receive payments. So there's a lot to be done in that particular area. And I think that that's another area that the administration and the legislature should look into. Well, good. Thank you all for coming today, and we appreciate it, and we know we'll be on top of this. We're sure you will be as well, trying to help working families as we move forward. Thank you.